Hello everyone, my name is Ryu, and I have been working with game development for a very long time, right? I've been doing this specific thing here with voice directing actually. And if you're like a person that thinks more about stuff, reflecting stuff, whatever you call it, please subscribe to the video too, right? Because a lot of people of course jumped on this thing. It's massively trending, right? Hellena Taylor here, right? Talking about, boycotting Bayonetta 3 and so on. But instead of just doing a video immediately, right? I'm more a person who thinks about it a lot, right? Like over it. But some friends. I have met Hideki once in real life. I have worked, both in Japan, Europe, and America, right? The game development. So I talked to some people, and I'm like, because end of the day, right? I'm gonna break this down here, as I always do, and the end result usually is that everyone hates me now, but it's like, I'm always trying to be the most unbiased, most neutral, right? Looking at both sides of it and so on, right? And of course, my biggest question here immediately, has been the first topic of the video, is of course, is $4,000, which then she's, I bought it too low, is it actually a low price point, right? For voice acting? And I can say here immediately, it isn't. So that is the huge thing here immediately, right? It isn't actually that low pay, given that you used to voice lines. However, right? She's the main character. It is a third game, right? It's a franchise, and she's playing, the lead character, right? So then, of course, you usually get more. So, already at that point, I have to say that $4,000 wouldn't actually be that bad of a pay. Okay, let's first watch the video and, see what she says and so on, right? This is the main clip that's going massively viral.
Hello, my name's Hellena Taylor, and I am the voice of Bayonetta.
She was, of course, an English version then.
Why I didn't voice Bayonetta 3.
I think she voiced it in the board games and
Bayonetta
not in the anime.
But an approximated $450 million.
This was
That's not including merchandise. As an actor, I trained for a total of 7.5 years.
So this is like a really weird. Let me pause it actually. That thing I think is really weird. So I'll go into it a little later, but I do want to point out that I think it's kind of weird how she's phrasing it, because I'm gonna come into it later in the video. We're talking about comparing a voice actor, right? Because I've hired voice actors, and I also hired mostly designers and developers, artists in my life, right? So I hired engineers, right, that have worked for 15 years. You know what I mean? They have a master's degree. I work people have a PhD, So you can have people that have more experience than her straight up in just studying in academia, right? And let's be honest here, I'm commenting this later in the video, but everyone is basically underpaid in the game industry, and I have worked with people, even myself included, have worked for less money than this in amount, right? Having like a master's degree or PhD and so on. So it's a little bit like, okay, I really like how that's phrased, honestly.
Art Lambda, voice coach Barbara Barkery, and 4.5 years with the legendary Larry Moss.
Yes, it's throwing out a lot of names, but that's just like...
And what did they think this was worth? What did they offer to pay me?
She does sound like she's very famous, but she isn't really famous.
The whole game.
That's a negative. No, but it's just like...
was $4,000 US.
Yeah, it's $4,000.
Insult to me.
It's probably a lowball. I will cover it in the video here then, if $4,000 is reasonable or not.
To work on my talent and everything that I have given to this game and to the fans. I am asking the fans to boycott this game, and instead spend the money that you would have spent on this game donating it to charity. I didn't want the world. I didn't ask for too much. I was just asking
for a lot of boycotting. She probably breaks the NDA, but talk about it later in the video. But
what they did was legal, but it was immoral.
Yeah, it was legal, it was immoral. So I don't think I want to break down this video, right? The main topic that I had in the video is $4,000 actually bad and good pay? That's the first topic, right? Is she arguably famous enough? I would say here immediately, no, because she hasn't done much other than Bayonetta. So I think it's a bit weird how she's phrasing things like, I work with this person, and this was my mentor and so on, right? But I don't know any of these people's name, right? I heard of them maybe once or twice, and more people always play the Japanese. Anyway, it's a little bit like, okay, the whole boycotting thing, a lot of people calling it entitled, right? And my immediate thinking is that, but you have people that have worked on this game for maybe like 3 years. Let's think I have a game developer, right? Like a coder guy. He been using it for 3 years, right? Full time for 3 years. And her voice acting is, we talk about it in point 1, but it's probably like a month's work, right? Something like that, at best, right? So it's like a really, really weird. It says, what about everyone else that works on the game, right? So people in the fans say that, oh, but they already get salary. Yeah, but they want people to play the game. They will get fired, right? If the game doesn't sell enough and so on. They will get a new job and so on. They have families. So it's a really weird thing, and it's. So we talk about that definitely. I think it's a very weird thing, the whole boycotting itself. She even ends by saying it's legally correct, but it's not a moral way, right? But it's basically like, yeah, it's legally correct. So why should you ruin it for everyone else that worked on the game, right? I think that's the big issue. So comment on it in the video. Okay, so a couple things I want to break down, right? And the first thing, of course, is $4,000 a good or a bad pay? I think this obviously is the main thing here, right? Like, is that actually good or not to make $4,000? And here I have to say immediately, right? And I can see now that a lot of people are gonna, give flake, hate me now because I'm gonna go against the poor voice actors. But honestly, the way she had presented this thing is a massive red flag to me, right? And why do I say that? Maybe as a cynical producer, director guy, I'm cynical, I'm old man, I'm cynical. But she never specifies even a rough estimation how much hours this actually is, right? And that is a massive, massive issue here. Because if you're actually gonna ask me and say, okay, but is $4,000 a good or a bad pay? I have to actually be able to know, is it a week's work, is it a month's work, or is it a day's work, right? And we don't know that. She has nowhere, people ask for it several times, she has nowhere at all specified any like estimation on the time frame, right? And so honestly, without that, we can't actually say if $4,000 is, of course, good or bad, right? Because when you work with gig stuff, right? Consulting and so on as well. And voice acting is basically a consulting business, right? You consult, you go over there, you do one thing and you leave, right? It's not a permanent contract. I have myself, for example, done consulting at many video game companies. And when you do that, right? Sometimes you can make a lot of money. For example, I worked on a card game a couple of years ago. And they wanted me to do blah, blah, blah. And they estimated that my design work and so on would probably be like 3 months. Okay. I knew I could do it faster. And 3 months pay was good enough anyway. So I set it, and I did it in 2 weeks, okay? So I finished in 2 weeks, right? Means that I could make 3 months salary roughly then in 2 weeks, right? Because I was very, very effective, right? I have never happened to me actually, because I'm quite fast, honestly. And I'm quite more effective with people, honestly. But you also have people that take gigs, right? Consulting gigs, which they overpay, right? Or they underpay, so to say. So basically, you might be in a situation where you say, oh, I can do this for $1,000, right? Because I can do it in 1 day. But it actually took 10 days, right? So you didn't lose money, but it took more time than you went, right? That's very common, especially in general IT business, where it's like, we can make this bank app or whatever, right? Or we can do this website, something, and you take the pay, right? Like a sum, get one of your consults, engineers to fix the shit, right? And it takes much longer time, right? And that's a lose for you then, right, so to speak. That happens a lot, right? So without knowing the actual valuation here, right? Because you don't have a time frame at all, it is bad, and I do think it reflects really badly on Hellena Taylor, right? I'm not kind of guy, but it reflects badly because she has not specified this in any of the clips whatsoever, right? Nor in any of the myriad of comments or whatever, right? People asked for this thing, and she doesn't do it, right? You can say that plot on the game hasn't either, but I think that as a company, if you're being attacked by someone that broke NDA, as a company, you don't want to go out and say that, well, we estimate that it's only 50 hours of work, and then someone else is like, oh, that's wrong, it's 62 or something, you know what I mean? As a company, you kind of want to play quiet here for the most part, right? So we're going to see when the actual game comes out, right? It'll be very interesting when actually Bayonetta figures out, and you can kind of see how much the character actually speaks, right? And you can kind of estimate how much time it would take. But from experience then, right? So I've been a voice director and doing stuff and so on. $4,000 is a good pay. And that is the honest truth. It isn't a bad pay. Like that, honestly, right? Of course, I'm looking mostly at, like, oh, I'm just gonna voice this character here, right? It's not the main character. Bayonetta is the main character. She's the main character. She's the lead character. That obviously will get you a better price. But at the same time, Bayonetta, assuming, of course, that Bayonetta 3 is like 1 and 2, but I think it's fair to assume, doesn't really talk that much. I mean, yes, she does like, yeah, let's get sexy or whatever, right? But again, my point, that's just a one-liner she says like 10 times per fight, right? The cutscenes aren't that long, right? She doesn't speak that much in the cutscenes because they're very action-packed. Obviously, he's speaking while she's fighting, you know what I mean? But they're very action-packed. So this isn't like voicing, let's say, FF7 remake, right? Or any other, like, you know, JRPG. It's like we can have a dialogue for 40 hours, right? Because if it was a massive JRPG, then I would say, yeah, $4,000 sounds really bad, because it's probably gonna be like a few months of voicing this character, because there's so much dialogue, right? I think it's very fair to assume that the amount of work she would have to do with Hellena Taylor to voice Bayonetta in Bayonetta 3 is probably less than a month's work. I think that's very fair to assume. I think she definitely could have voiced all the voice lines in the previous games in less than a month. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But I do think that's pretty fair. And she hasn't explained it either how much time she spent in the previous games. She could have estimated and said, you know, oh, in Bayonetta 1 I spent 3 months on that game, right? So then obviously 4K is a terrible pay, you know. That's like, yeah, there's nothing then for 3 months pay, right? But if she actually knows that, no, I spent, you know, 1 month, right, on Bayonetta 1, and it's roughly going to be the same thing for Bayonetta 3, then $4,000 is a good pay. And I want to say this thing here, right? People might say, oh, never, but obviously, everyone is basically underpaid in the game industry. I've been as well, right? You know, it's terrible pay. At worst, I worked for $2,200 at a company in Sweden, and that's when I had an epic master degree, you know, PhD, publications, so on, blah, 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 so on, right? So I was highly, highly educated, right? And had experience, and I only got like $2,200 to have a middle management position as well. Like, that's how crazy it can be, right? So the game industry can be really, really lowballing people, right? Because you want to work at your dream game, or you want to work at the PC. So it's a very, very common thing. And the thing is that honestly irks me, and I'll come to it later in point 3 with boycotting. But the thing is that if you look at the Japanese average salary, right? So I worked in Japan, right? I worked in Sweden, all across Europe. I worked in like Sweden, Japan, Ireland, England, a little bit of France, and also in the USA, right? Yeah. So I've been in these countries basically, right? And like her salary, so to speak, then of let's say a month. I think it's very fair to assume here, right, that this is a month's work at max, right? $4,000. That is much better than you would make in Sweden as an average video game salary. Okay, so in Sweden, the average salary generally is roughly like $3,000 per month. A little more, I think, now inflation, but let's say $3,000, right? And as a video game developer, as an artist or a coder, you know, or a game designer, or whatever, you basically can make less than that, right? Unless if you live in Stockholm, then you probably make a little more, a rough that's estimate. But if you live in like Gothenburg or Malmö or something, you could easily only make $2,000 or whatever. Right? So when I was like a lead game designer at a Swedish game company, right? I have all everyone's salary as director, so I had people's salary and so on. Most people we hired, especially the kind of the younger people, right? Kind of the fresh grad and so on, they were making like $2,500, you know, $2,400, whatever. They were making in the 2,000 brackets, right? That's basically the industry standard in Sweden. So she's almost making twice the amount of money a person with a master degree would make, right, in Sweden. And she's like, I work for I have 7 years experience, right? Trade for 7 years, but I can literally, I know a lot of people, right, that have 5+ years, right, of educational experience, and then they also have like 4 or 5 years of work experience, and they would make like half of she would make, right, as a developer and full time and so on, right? In worst case scenario. So it's really, you have to take that measurement, right? And if you look at Japan, in Japan, $4,000, that is better than the average development too. It's like $3,000 something. In Tokyo, it's like $3,200, $300 for like an average game developer, right? So she's still gonna make more money, right, than the average like person that works on the CDI of the game, makes the cutscenes, or the person that coded that stuff, or technical animated and stuff, right? She's basically getting a better pay than almost anyone else, you know, in like the typical employment bracket, right? Sure, the higher ups, right, the investors, people that own the game or whatever, are gonna make more, right? The lead developers are gonna make more and so on. But from the average standpoint, No, she's making a lot more than they are. Probably, yeah. I mean, literally, the Japanese she made like $1,000 more, right, than the person that animated the fight scene would. So that's the honest truth, right? And I really want to point it out. Say yes, everyone's underpaid, right? You know, like everyone's underpaid, right? If you go and work, let's say Sweden again, and you get a little $2,500, right? You're a fresh graduate. But if you go and work in the normal IT industry at like a bank instead, right, with your master's degree you just got this week, you're gonna get like $1,000 more, right? You're gonna get $3,500, right? So almost everyone's underpaid, right? You're gonna get $1,000 more if you take the bank job instead of the game industry job, right? And I have done both, right? I worked for both the military, I worked for game companies, I worked for IT companies, fintech, and so on, right? And of course, for me, like when I work at a fintech company, so it's financial technology, right? So banks, or it's usually more modern than financial programs, right? When I work for them, they're paying me easily twice the amount of money I'm making in the game industry, okay? Like I can make 3-4 times, right, the salary being a fintech company compared to a game industry company, right? Like with my experience and my degrees and so on, right, and my publications and so on. So yeah, like it's a huge difference, right? So everyone's underpaid. That doesn't mean it's right to underpay her either. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that I just want to give it perspective, right? That $4,000 for like a month's work or so in the game industry is higher than the industry standard in most countries. It really is. Especially in America, it's probably higher. So that's kind of where. So we actually in America, if you include in USA, then if you include like QA people, right? Even QA developer, but same thing as testers. But if you include testers, right? You include other people working in the game industry in this like the lower task jobs, right? They're making like pennies, right? If you're a QA tester, I work as well, of course. If you're QA tester in like California, you're making like $1,000 a month, okay? Like you make nothing, you know what I mean? So it also it's really, and then again, it doesn't mean that she should be underpaid. Everyone should have a higher salary, but it still is weird, And I think it's very important because we're coming to this point later here, right? But the boycotting, and it's very important to think about. Okay, but what about everyone else that worked in this game? What about the testers? They got like the best half your salary, right? What about them? No one's gonna play. You want no one to play the game they spent like 2 years testing. That to me is like absurd. Those people that spend way more time than you have in this game, and they definitely are getting less hour pay than you did. Way less, okay? Way less than you ever did. So it feels very weird, right, to boycott in that aspect. But I want to say this thing too here, right? When I was this voice director of one game, and we hired people and so on, right, as a present to her, we were paying them like $1,000, $2,000. They weren't playing the main lead character; they were playing like several minor characters in our games. But yeah, $4,000 would be no one got paid that much in the game I worked on when I was the voice director. No one got paid that much. The highest someone got was $2,000, even less than that. Okay. But of course, they recorded their voice lines in like 1 or 2 weeks, depending on how much they had to do. So I think it's fair, honestly, to assume here, right, without having played the game, but she might even finish this stuff in less than a month. Right? Remember, this is like 2 weeks of work for her, right? And then she actually would make $8,000, right, in a month. You know what I mean? Like it's very, very hard to say it honestly because no one wants to tell us how much hours she actually would have worked, right? But I keep saying here, I think it's very fair to assume that she is not going to work more than a month, right? And again, $4,000 in a month, that is fine in the game industry. She probably would actually do this quicker, right? So, you should put it out though. Usually then, of course, how you do it, right? We have a gig consult economy, is that you need to take more than one job, right? You know what I mean? You need to do more than one of these, right? For example, if she could do this thing in 2 weeks, and then another game in 2 weeks, right? She would make a lot of money, right? You know what I mean? However, and this is coming in a little bit, she hasn't done anything basically. Separate, right? Yeah. The new voice actor Jennifer Hall has done like 100 games, right? She makes a lot of money because she can keep doing casting all the time, right? But Hellena Taylor here actually has basically no other voice work for like the last 5-6 years or whatever, and so I'm sure she really needs to make like a big buck right on this game. But that's just how the industry works. You're supposed to have several voice lines or several voice works. you're supposed to do all the stuff at the same time. Like, I have voiced parts of my games I've worked on, right? So I've been like the lead game insider, and I also voiced a few characters. You know what I mean? Like, it's like a bonus thing. Yeah, I can voice that character. I can look like an evil maniac. Oh, I can do it. You know, like it's how that. Yeah, like it's not supposed to be in the gig economy. Again, I'm not defending the low salaries, right, or whatever. I'm just saying that to me it comes off weird because it feels like she's like, oh, I should make a full life salary in this thing, right? And a lot of people defending her are like, oh yeah, it's so lowballing, only 4,000. But again, only in what context? If it's only in 2 weeks, that's good pay, okay? And what if you could have another job on the same time that month, right? Like I said, in my experience, right, being a mostly designer or developer consulting, right, and freelancing, I can get like, I have literally had months where I had like 3 or even 4 freelancing consulting gigs in the same month. When I was freelancing from home, I managed to work at 4 companies at the same time, and I did all the job right, you know, like I wasn't late in anything, and I made a lot of money. It was like one of my best so big salary months I ever had, right, because I got 4 months, you know, basically, right, on this 1 month. So, like in her case then, I could make $4,000, right, times 4. Yeah, it's not extremely good pay, because I currently make more money than that, right, in my current job, because, you know, I'm highly educated, blah, 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 and so on, right, a lot of experience. So I make more than that per month. But what if, again, when I was freelancing and I managed to get, 4 jobs in the same month, right? Bam! I'm making $16,000 a month, right? You know, there's a lot of money, right? There's a great salary. Of course, next month, maybe I only have 1 gig, right? And then 2 months later, I have no gig, right? That's kind of how it works. You have to be able to overlap and so on, right? So it's a little bit weird, without knowing how much hour it is. Of course, maybe everything I'm saying is wrong here, because maybe it takes like half year to voice Bayonetta, but let's be honest here, it is Bayonetta. It isn't like I'm gonna voice Aerith or like Tifia in like, 300 scenes. It isn't a JRPG, right? It is an action RPG at best, right? Because you have levels and so on, and it's like a 10-hour game, right, with mostly just combat, right? So I have to assume it is. But anyway, I think the second point here, and that is that I want to talk about her fame, right, and her. I sound kind of mean, right, whatever, probably, but I think it's very fair to put out. It's a very short point here, but the new voice of the realm, she is Jennifer. She's way more famous because she brings in more line, right? So she probably got better paid, as everyone's assuming. That's probably true. But at the same time, yeah, if you're gonna have the argument of like my voice is worth as much because I'm famous or whatever, well, yes, of course, the older voice actress is gonna get paid more then because she's more famous. She's definitely more famous. Like I don't think I've ever heard her voice except just as Bayonetta, right? As I mentioned, she hasn't really done much else, which is, honestly, and I have to say this, right, it's a negative for her again, because if she was a very, very, prolific actress, right, and she kept doing many, many roles between, obviously, then 2 and 3, right? Let's say she did, 20 other games, right, between 2 and 3, and then she did, of course, a bunch of, I don't know, animes or other stuff, or even, playing in live action speak, whatever, being a YouTube podcast or whatever, right? If she had increased her fame, right, she also would have probably increased her salary. Like, that's just how it is, right? Because, yes, there is truth to it, that as a voice actor, you get paid to some aspect, right, for how famous you are. So I think it's very fair to say, too, that I'm not saying she's a bad voice actor. I'm just saying that her only fame is to have played Bayonetta, which of course is a big role to have played. But she has no other credits, basically, right, on her name, where the new voice actor for Bayonetta she's one of the biggest voice actors, right? And that's also going to be easily, people are going to say, oh, it's unfair, she's getting paid more or whatever. But again, I don't think it's unfair at all, right? That's just how life works. Yeah, if you cast a much more famous actor in a movie or whatever, right, they're gonna get paid more, right? So the new voice actress definitely got more paid. We don't know what she got, but she definitely got more. But that's just logic because she's way more famous. So I think that's a little bit like that kind of dollar comparison. Also, it's like, yeah, but this is like, if I recast, in a movie I'm directing and I get a way bigger actor, that person's gonna demand more money, right? You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah. Okay, now let's talk about boycotting the actual game or the franchise, right? Because I think that's where she definitely alienated a lot of people, right? And me included to some extent, I have to admit, right? Because I'm just immediately being like, why should I boycott a game? Because you're working on it. And I think she shoots herself in the foot a bit, right? Because she basically admits that oh yeah, like what they did isn't illegal. It's just like a mean thing to do. Right? They were just mean to me. But it's like, were they really mean to you? They were underpaying you. Again, I agreed to underpaying you, but as my first point was, right, I think that everyone is getting underpaid in the game industry. Massive. So I also been underpaid, and I would argue that I have been more underpaid than she has, right? Not I sound salty, but you know, whatever, right? So the boycott thing I really dislike, right? In the sense that, of course, if you don't want to buy a game, you don't have to buy a game, right? I mean, I'm a very free market guy. If you don't want to buy the game, don't buy the game. I'm not going to say to buy the game. But I'm just thinking that, you know, there's a lot of people, right, involved in developing this game. And I would easily stand by saying that it's a lot of people that have spent way more time of their life and effort and so on, right, than she has. Okay, let's just be honest here. I'm not sitting here, oh, voice actor, they're all terrible or whatever, right? But for example, the game I was the voice director at, then, right, and we hired these, you know, we had 5 voice people. 5 VA and 1 6 that did like narration. Then we had some audio engineerings and so on, right? Blah 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 and so on. So the audio engineering guys, they were consultings, so they worked maybe like 2 months on this game. And the voice actors, they worked maybe like 1 to 2 weeks on this game, right? You know what I mean? And me, as the lead game designer, creative director and so on, that kind of creative, you know, a big guy, right, so to speak. I worked roughly like 2.5 years on this game, right, you know, 2.5 years. Now, of course, that game is mostly my vision, right? I designed the characters, I wrote all the dialogue, I wrote the backstory, the lore and so on, and I also implemented, as technical lead, so I also implemented all the scripts for the characters and so on, right? And I designed the mechanics and yada. But 2.5 years, a lot of time. I also did the level design, I also did the loaded and so on. Get my point, right? I did, of course, 100 times more work, right, than like the voice actor did, right? I'm not saying that the voice actor did a terrible job, whatever, you know, they did a good job, right? My point is that coming in as a voice actor in many games, you don't do that much hourly compared to like, here's the creative director, you know what I mean? And that's being truthful, right? Again, I'm not saying that they don't matter or whatever, or they should just take whatever they get or whatever. That's not my point, but I'm just saying that, come on, like a person that actually been here for like 2.5, 3 years, they have done a lot more than you have. You're here to voice a character, you do it in less than a week, and then, you know, I mean, you did a good job, but it's like the person that designed the character, coded the character, coded the abilities, written all the dialogue and all the lore and everything, and yada yada yada. They have done way more for this character, right? Or this battle scene or whatever. The person that did the technical animation and so on, they have done a lot more work than the VA has, right? And that's just a fact, because yeah, it takes a lot more time, for example, to, you know, like code, let's just say that the battle mechanics of a game, right? The ability to be able to shoot this thing and so on, and then the physical data, to code that, maybe it's like years of work, right? Where the voice actor is, I'm gonna voice 5 lines in this, you know, boss fight, right? And the guy actually coding it spent like a year of that. You know what I mean? I'm just being like, in comparison, right? It can take so much more time, right? Like in the game I talked, for example, right? The game I'm talking about, but I was a voice director. I also did, as I mentioned, the level design of that game. Not the graphics then. The artist guys, right? They did all the trees and all the mountains and the volcanoes and whatever. They did all the cool stuff, right? But I wrote the logical code for the level design. The actual, so you can, you know, move in the world and stuck in trees. Yeah, I wrote all the code for that, okay? The development code, right? Yeah. That took me about 3 months, right? To write all the code for all the level design. And also designing them and so on. As well, I guess they know how to work. And balance them and so on. And for example, that game only had 4 stages then when it was released, but we probably had like 12, 13, right, in development. People were scrapped, they were hard to balance, didn't look good enough, you know, and so, right, and so on, right. So I spent about 3 months on that, and I spent about maybe 3 more months writing the AI for the campaign, so on, right. We had a campaign, so there was not a person doing the actual stages for like the level design for the single player campaign, but I wrote the AI, how, you know, the AI's behavior. I wrote the AI code for that. That was like another 3 months or so, right? You know what I mean? Like that takes a lot of time, right? So I spent like 6 months, I guess, total, but they can separate things though. But you get my point. I spent like, yeah, at least 3 months then on just logically writing all the levels, right, so to speak. And the main other guy did the campaign. he took most of my code, right, to make his campaign afterwards, right? So I spent 3 months on that, and then here comes the game artist, and the game artist, don't get me wrong, they're working there 8 hours a day, right? You know, they're working on other stuff too, but it's comparable on a level appearance here, right? The artist guy, he comes in, he makes, you know, cute trees, some dragon in the background. I mean, he makes it look cool, right there. But he spent maybe a week, right, on making something. Took me maybe like, you know, a month to code. He's like a week for him to do it, you know, the art stuff, right? And then of course, then he goes to do something else. His second week, he goes to do the art for a character, right, or a, you know, he goes the effect for this thing, or maybe he does a, you know, play of the win, or whatever. You get my point. But just like, that's kind of how the game industry or the IT can be, right? You know, I spent months on doing the code here. You spent like a day on doing the art, and it's finished. You know what I mean? It can be very, very like different, right? How much time you actually have to spend on something and comparable and so on, right? It can be quite different, and that's where coming again back then to the voice actor. And I'm just like, yeah, but you spent like 2 weeks voicing my character. Took me like 3 months to code that character, so I don't really feel that we are doing the same amount of work, because we haven't done the same amount of work, right? And so I'm not being salty, being like, well, you shouldn't stop. Why do people like this person for? Should like me instead. I wrote the code for this character, right? But I think it's fair to say that to me then, right, coming from as I've been a developer and designer and all this stuff in the game industry and blah blah so on, to me it feels very insulting, right, when someone is like, I should boycott this game because they didn't hire me, or they actually did hire me, but I didn't want to work for them because they low paid me, which is true though, they probably did underpay her, but they were like, oh, they underpaid me, so no one should play this game. And it's like, yeah, but haven't other people worked on this game for years? And even if you had voiced the character, I would say that they have done more for the game, like the person that actually animates every fight scene, Bayonetta, you know, the people that are doing every cutscene, right, that makes Bayonetta look cool and sexy and so on, they are definitely doing way more work than the VA is, okay? And again, that's not me shitting on the voice actor. I'm just saying that, you know, the new voice actress, right, she brings life to the character and yada yada, right? But factually, right, the person that's on the cutscenes that she's voicing, the person, or more the Persians, but the persons on the cutscenes, trust me, right, they spend way more time than the voice actor has, right, to make those come to life, right, you know, animating it, the effects and all stuff. It's probably like a team of people, right? It's like 10 people have spent a year on that, you know what I mean? It's so much more work time for them than for the VA. Again, not saying that the VA doesn't do anything. I'm just saying that they don't, from an hourly work perspective, right, they do incredibly less, right, you know? Like, it's my pure work aspect, right? Yes, I do think it's really unfair to say that, oh, you should boycott my game, even if you worked on the game, right? Thinking about every other person involved in the game, right? Of course, people all say, oh, Hideki is being a douche or blah blah and so on, right? And there's probably more truth to it, right? That he's kind of acting like, oh, she's just a whatever and so on. That's probably a bigger reason to boycott it. But I just feel like, you know, you have to think about everyone else involved in the game, right? All the designers, the developers, the artists, all the audio engineers, whatever, everyone else, producers and so on, every other role in this game has spent listening. And then let's take that third point then. Okay, so people are saying that, oh, but if you don't buy the game, who cares? They already get their hourly salary. But the thing is that some game companies, of course, you get bonus and so on, right? So they won't get any bonus. But this is more that, you know, if you work on this game, right, and it doesn't sell well because people boycotted it, you're gonna get fired, okay? And maybe you still got your money, because you worked there for like 3 years in this game, but you're still gonna get fired, and it's gonna be hard to get a new job perhaps, right, so on. It's gonna be stress for your family, so it's still bullshit to be like, oh, but they don't need... Yeah, I really hate it when people are like, oh, who cares about the developers, they already got paid anyway. Yeah, but they're gonna get fired, and it's gonna be hard to get a new job and all this stuff, right? No, it isn't that simple to just be like, oh, you already got your salary, so whatever, right? And they might not get any bonuses, you know. In a lot of game companies, I don't know how Platinum Game does it, but in a lot of companies, right, you actually have a low ball salary, like I talked about earlier, right? But you might get a bonus if the game sells, you know, fairly good, right? So they might not be underpaid if the game actually sells good as well. I don't think it's the case, to be honest, here in Platinum Games, but it might be the case, right? And so on. But also, generally speaking, right, if this game sells really well, and if you work as a developer, and you have like $2,000 monthly salary wouldn't be impossible, right, in Japan and so on, because they have low salary in Japan, generally speaking. And then this game sells really well. Now you can apply for another job, another company, and say, I worked in this game. I was the lead developer. Okay, you probably make more than, but still get point. I was this guy, and if you hire me, your game is gonna sell also good, you know. And then they might get a new job with higher salary and so on, right? So it's much, much more complicated than you're saying that, oh, but the developer guy, he already got his salary, so screw him, right? No, it's terrible way to look at it. It's terrible to look at it. So I don't like that. The next point I want to bring out, though, and I sound really against her here, but again, I keep saying, right? But this point, though, yeah. So the next point I want to bring up is that she basically told that the next voice actors shouldn't be allowed to sign the poster with her and so on. And interesting thing here is that a lot of, you know, voice actors, right? They make money going to conventions, right? They make money going to different kind of, you know, anime conventions, etc., right? And Comic Con and so on, right? That's how they make their money, to some aspect, right? And I guess that's a little bit what she's afraid of. That's probably more what it's about, honestly, right? Not that she's like, I own this character. Screw you, lady. I think she wants to be, you know, invited to a con, and just want the new voice actress to be able to take her spot, right, as the Bayonetta. That's probably more what it's about, first and foremost. But also kind of speaks to her red flag in the beginning of the video, right? Because as she's like, I'm only getting $4,000, and she refuses to say and, you know, and elaborate, but how many hours is that? But also then, yes, you make extra money, like selling autographs, right? Going to concerts and so on. So saying that I only get $4,000 isn't actually true if you get a voice a famous character. So it is a little bit tricky in that point too, right? Or something just that to say. But if we ignore that, I think that the general idea that if you voice a character, it's your character, I think that's crazy talk, right? I think it's crazy, it's entitlement, it is crazy talk in my opinion, and I absolutely agree with people say it's entitled because she didn't even come up with the character, right? I mean, I have worked some games where I've written the whole character. It's one game I worked on where I wrote the character, I wrote his backstory, I wrote the lore, I said all of it, I coded all of the bits, and I voiced the character. So then I can say, that's my character, okay? I did everything with that character. I both designed the character, and I freaking implemented the character in the code, and it's a long backstory why, because basically the other guys then that I worked with didn't want to have this hero in the game, because they were like, oh, it's too complicated to implement this character, the code is too complicated, it's too much, you know, weird stuff and so on, you're too crazy, right? And I was like, screw you guys, and they told me it took them 6 months to implement this hero then in the game, right? So they refused to do it, and I was like, I can do it in 1 month, you guys, you suck, right? This is a true story, and then I went and did it in 2 weeks, okay? To prove them wrong. That's always the best. I will prove you wrong, right? But it's a true story. So I implemented the whole character by myself, completely. Even if I wasn't supposed to do it, I wasn't the developer. I was like, screw you guys. I will go and get the code myself then, because you guys are terrible job right there. So I did it myself. So I ended up doing everything with that character except basically the model, right? The art model. I also did that. But I still did the technical animation of it. So I did like 95% of that character. And I was like, I'm gonna voice him to them, because he's like basically me. Was that no? But honestly, yeah. I can then say, this is my character, okay? Autograph, I am this guy, right? Like, I really so, right? But, of course, when you work in this game, yes, she is, of course, voicing Bayonetta, but, you know, I keep going back to what I said earlier, right? That is like, yeah, but, you know, the person that did all the cutscene animation, she probably spent like 2.5 years on that or whatever. Yeah, she probably spent way more time than you did. The person that did all those technical animation part, the movement and the VFX of, you know, better moving and so on, probably more than one person, right? But yeah, but those people spent way more time than you did to make the character come alive, right? And again, I'm not saying that she's part of, you know, Bayonetta's identity, right? But I'm just saying that she's one part of a bigger whole, right? She's a part of an assembly of, you know, several parts, right? The designer, the artist, the developer, right? Yeah, there's a lot of people that are Bayonetta, right? So I think it's very entitled, and it sounds like I hate voices, but you know, if someone again, people have voiced characters that I have, created, right? People have voiced characters that I have created. I have written the character, come up with the character, I designed the character, right? And I decide how it's going to look and everything, and then someone else voiced them, right? That's been happened to me, right? And if they claim that they are that character, and they made the character, whatever, I would say that's complete bullshit. I made the character, you voiced a character that I have created, right? It's kind of like if I, wrote, let's say, a book, right? And then the books get, of course, either animated or into a live action, right? And someone is like, well, I mean, yes, you're playing that character, but I'm the one that created that character. I'm the author, right? Whatever. Yeah, you're playing character. So if you want to go to a con and say, oh, I was, I don't know, let's make a new character then. Super Leatherman or whatever, yeah, Super Leatherman, yeah, that's my new character, right? And someone plays the character, he wants to go to a con and write people autograph, that's fine by me, I don't think he can't do it. But if he claims that he is the character, and he created the character, whatever, he's only the character, I was like, no, I've created the character, I wrote the character, you play the character, right? Like, we both part of making that character become the movie character, so to speak, but you can't just solely own that character, right? So she doesn't own Bayonetta, she did nothing to actually create Bayonetta, right? She voiced Bayonetta, she did part of the thing, right? But she didn't do, again, the design, the weaponry, the guns on the shoes, whatever, right? Yeah. She didn't come up with any of the ideas, she didn't come up with the fight, the boss fights, whatever, right? She didn't do the cutscenes. Obviously, if you summarize it, right, maybe she's like 5% of the totalness that makes Bayonetta. And probably less than that, right? Probably less than that. So it's just, so I feel that's very entitled to claim that you are the character, and you absolutely can't say that the next person who wasn't the character can't, do all together. Because of course, if you work in the game industry, anime, whatever, right, and you do a lot of voice acting, of course you might be replaced, right? And we have especially like animes that have been going on forever, right? Some of them have replaced the voice acting several times for characters, so that you might have a character with like 6 different ladies, right? All of them can, of course, with an autograph say, oh yes, I played this character in this anime, in that movie, right? You know what I mean? Of course they can. So that is crazy. And maybe one reason why, because I have to say it in total, right, that I feel that she comes off very weird to me, which doesn't be truthful about the money and so on. But, yeah, I mean, obviously it's a massive red flag for me. So there are 2 major red flags, right? That she won't come clean with how much hour it would be, the actual payment, pay for that stuff. But then this thing, right? Say, oh, no one else can pretend to be the character or whatever. Yeah, that is crazy talk. Right? That is completely weird, and she should know that too. And it's basically like she's acting like they can't make the game without me, right? But it comes back to that, yeah, she's kind of like, they can't make the game if I'm not playing the game. That's kind of how she's acting, but she didn't create the character, she didn't write the character, but she pretends that she's the owner of the character, So it's a really, really weird take on it, and I have never almost seen her act like that. They always kind of know that, no, you're part of, the end result of this character. Like I said, you are a percentage of the complete, assembly of what makes this character alive, right? So it is very, very weird. I mean, could the person, is a woman designed by how she looks, couldn't she say, it's my character, you can't go to a con and write your name on this character because I designed how she looks, right? It is my character. Couldn't they claim that? They would have a much higher percentage produced on this character. So couldn't they claim that? It just doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, what do you guys think, right? I felt that, as I said, to me, unfortunately, right, in this case, it's an immediate red flag, as I keep saying, right? She doesn't actually explain what man she would make, right? An hour and so on. But like I keep saying, right, everyone's underpaid and so on. So maybe it is that entitlement of saying that I own the character thing, right? That is weird, right? But I definitely. So what do you guys think, right? Yeah, I definitely kind of against her, right? Because I feel most of her stuff is. She obviously isn't saying the truth, right, about some of the aspects. It clearly isn't. Factually, is not saying the truth about the actual money or the hours or whatever. She's not entitled to the character. She didn't create herself. It's a weird aspect of it, right? Which I really dislike from her standpoint. Though at the same time, I obviously agree that everyone is underpaid in the game industry. One last thing I will say is that the game industry, though, right? People are hurt. She has a really weird take on it that, the game sold like $100 million or whatever, right? But that's not how it works. If you're a contracted person that's employed at a company and just works for it, right? It's not like the developers either necessarily would make more money, right? If the game sells 10 or I mean, I covered earlier, right? If they might get more money if it sells more, right? If she wants, right, to make more money on this character, right, she would have to have a contract which is, of course, paid by the number of games sold. It's called royalty deal, right? She would need to have a royalty deal, right, if she was actually going to make more money. And I think last thing I want to put out there is that, to me, this reminds me of the author, right, of The Witcher, right? So The Witcher series, right, the books. He felt that he got, you know, shafted, right, by CD Projekt Red because the game sold incredibly well, right? And he was like, I only made $1,000. They tricked me, whatever, right? But that was bullshit. They offered him a royalty deal. We're gonna buy your books, right? Make games about them. And if you then, you know, if you sell one copy, you get, you know, $1, right? You get $1 per game sold, whatever, right? And he was like, and he didn't believe in video games. He didn't like video games. So he was like, what if you give me like $10,000 instead, and I just give the money immediately? And they were like, yeah, okay, sure. So they basically just bought, right, the rights for The Witcher from him without having to, you know, pay any royalty. But that, yes, he got like $10,000 or whatever immediately, right? But then when the game, of course, has sold more than 10,000 copies, he was actually not losing money, but he would have gotten more money, right, by taking a royalty deal. But of course, because he didn't do that, he got pissed off at them, right? And he complained that they were tricking him and so on for years. It was complete bullshit. He was just lying about it because they, again, legally offered him to get paid per game sold, and he didn't want that because he didn't think the game was going to sell anything, right? And I have to say, though, the way she portrays it, I'm just guessing it because of my point here, but maybe, right, maybe she's salty. Is she salty? Because maybe she was offered, like, you're gonna get, you know, not 1%, but maybe she was gonna get like, you know, 1,000% by game sold, right? Or you get, let's say, $4,000 right, for game one. I mean, you know, maybe she was offered like, you know, 4K, right, for the first game, or 1% or whatever, right? And she was like, no, I'll take the 4K. This game is only not gonna sell, you know, this many copies anyway. Right? Maybe that's it, right? But end of the day, though, usually, of course, voices that won't even get that kind of deal. They just get a fast, you know, stuck deal, right? Just like the developers, right? So I don't, honestly, I don't really like that, you know, attitude, right? It's just coming in with, I have to admit, I guess, right? Because, you know, I worked at many video game companies, and if you don't get like shares, I worked in some companies where I got, you know, stock share, right? If you don't get stock share for your work, you basically don't get any royalties, right? That's usually how you mostly get royalties, right? You actually get stock share in the company, right? So that's kind of it, though, you know, and I guess you can get stock shares too, but I don't know. It's just weird to me that you'd be like, well, I only got $4,000. Yeah, but you can't. It doesn't matter, you know, how much a game or any product sales if you only have a fast. I guess in the end, right, it doesn't matter how much a product is sold if your deal with the company you work for was only for a lump sum of money, right? Kind of like, again, the Witcher author. He got a lump sum of money. If he got the royalty deal, he would be way richer, right? That's kind of how it is. She can't really probably even get that option to get a royalty deal, but, you know, neither can the developer, right? Neither can the game artist, right? So I'm a little bit like, yeah, but that's how the industry works. If she has said, yeah, speaking that, and that's probably what I don't like, honestly, how it is, because if she has said that everyone in the game industry should have, you know, a royalty deal, everyone should get shares or whatever, everyone should get paid by percentage of the game profit, right? If everyone was gonna get that, that was her point, that the game industry is shit, everyone should get that, I would have agreed with her 100%, but she is coming off as, I don't think that I should get percentage, but everyone else, screw them, because she's also saying that she should boycott the game. Screw everyone else that works in the game, right? Yeah. So she doesn't seem to care about making the industry better, right? Honestly, right? She's just like, no, I don't care about that. But what do you guys think? Subscribe, slap button, and have a great day.